Hello, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking again with Angie Dobberfuhl.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming back.
Of course.
If you missed the last time Angie was on, it was episode 7, so just a couple before this one. We talked about Yoga Nidra, what that means, sort of getting into yoga outside of fitness. So today we're going to dive a little deeper into Yoga Nidra. So why don't you start off just again, if people haven't heard, what interested you about Yoga Nidra? What started you on this journey?
So some of it was just having that experience of body scans and meditation and getting into meditation and yoga, and then kind of finding this through, I don't know, a number of different things. I don't know that there was one moment for me, but it was kind of like a coalescing of all of these different things. And just finding Yoga Nidra and then realizing that there's something a lot deeper in the Yoga Nidra. Like I had done, I think like a lot of people do, is find it on Insight Timer.
Yes.
And so
use it to go to sleep.
Yeah, and I think I did that a lot because that was definitely something that I always kind of struggled with as a kid and even into my, early teens, 20. Heck, I struggle with it now sometimes even.
We should have pulled some numbers on that, like the number of people who struggle with sleep.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a lot higher.
Then than you might imagine, definitely.
And that's what Yoga Nidra translates to.
Is yogic sleep. Yeah, yeah.
But it's not just for sleep.
It's not just for sleep, and in fact, it wasn't meant for sleep. But it does kind of help get you out of the waking mind and bring you down into those deeper layers where your body's at rest, but your mind's somewhat still awake.
So what can happen in that state? Why is that beneficial?
So that's really beneficial because when you're in that subconscious state, it tunes you in to kind of those deeper levels of consciousness. It also just lets you release some of the tension and the holding on that we have in our conscious mind. So when you let this get offline and go down deep, then you can work with some of those emotional things that are underneath the surface without having to think about it. So it's intentional. You do bring an intention with you a lot of times. It's actually called a heartfelt resolve. And you have it initially when you're actually in that conscious state. And then as you go down deeper, you bring that heartfelt resolve back when you're not holding on so tightly. And so it allows things like habit formation or releasing habits to be a lot easier if you're doing this as a practice over time.
Oh yeah, I feel like a lot of us are becoming more aware of the programming that's there, just completely below the conscious mind. We see ourselves doing it, and it's like, why am I doing this? So it's cool to sort of peek behind the curtain and be like, all right, here's not only where it's happening, but how do we access that part? Because it's so much below the conscious mind.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what Yoga Nidra can do, is help you release that conscious mind and go into some of those deeper unconscious layers.
I love it. So there's multiple steps to Yoga Nidra.
Yeah.
And so you're saying some of them are more used for different purposes. So let's start out, I guess, just talking about the Yoga Nidra most people are familiar with, the one you pull up on Insight Timer when you can't sleep. So just rest and relaxation.
Yeah, so there's different ways you can do Yoga Nidra, so you don't have to have that heartfelt resolve. Some of them on Yoga Nidra, some of them on Insight Timer you might find have the heartfelt resolve. Those are the ones that if you listen to the whole thing, which I don't know, if you're using it, you're not necessarily realizing that you're listening to
The
it.
sleep ones I never hear the end of.
No, you never do, right? Like if you're going to sleep, you're gone. So if you hear anything that has some sort of visualization, or they're telling you a story that asks you to visualize, those are the ones that are using that kind of releasing, and it's actually working on releasing that conscious mind, the one that has the memories stored in it. But it doesn't always have to have all of those pieces. Sometimes it's just for relaxation. You may not bring this heartfelt resolve. You may not have some of that symbology that's in the other Yoga Nidras. But you always have to have certain steps. So the first one's just getting you relaxed and released, and that's the one you probably are aware of.
Yes.
Yeah. So
That
that's
guided body scan is just, you don't even realize all the different parts of your body until.
And even before that, you know, when you get, there's an actual step of getting you into that Yoga Nidra nest, they call it sometimes, where you just snuggle in and you get all the pillows exactly right, and you make sure your body's ready for hanging out, because even though we're used to yoga as the body's in movement, for Yoga Nidra, you want to make sure your body is really comfortable and settled in for the rest.
What does your body need to be able to find stillness?
Yeah.
And stillness that's not being like, I wish I could move my arm, but actual stillness.
Yes. So that's a really important step, is that pre-relaxation phrases, just making sure that you've got someplace cozy to be for a while.
And sometimes that's, you know, quiet in your house. You know, you don't want to be doing it in the middle of the living room while everyone's running around.
Not the easiest place to do Yoga Nidra. So setting that up is really actually one of the very first steps. And you have a wonderful space to do that.
Thank you. I know, I'm all about props and bolsters and cushions and blankets and, you know, really being able to find where you can find what you need to create more ease.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily, I think a lot of people think you have to do Yoga Nidra on your back. You don't necessarily. If it's over on one side, or if you're propped up a little bit, that's a lot of times, my Yoga Nidra teacher used to say one of the things that you can do if you find yourself falling asleep all the time, because you don't want to fall asleep all the time when you're doing Yoga Nidra. You actually want to access that thing where you're not entirely asleep. You can bring yourself up a little bit so you're not in that sleeping pose.
Okay.
So you bring the bolster behind your shoulders so that you're sitting up a little bit, and I found that was actually really helpful, because I didn't fall asleep as quickly when I was a little bit up.
I did a meditation this past weekend, and I had myself propped up at about a 45-degree angle. And the same thing, like I got nice and cozy, I settled in, but I was very much aware of the whole thing.
Right.
And that's what I needed that day. So getting yourself nice and ready.
Yes, and ready.
And then relaxation.
Where you really, it is a body scan. So you start with the body scan, you go through and check in with every single spot and see if there's any place where you are holding a little tension, and then see if you can ask your body to relax it a little bit. So you're intentionally relaxing different parts of your body and going through every single spot. And then at the end, that's when you're fully ready. A lot of times that's where we kind of plant the different Yoga Nidra schools do this differently, but with the one that I learned, there is an actual statement of Yoga Nidra has now begun. Yes.
So all the scripts that I've ever used have that.
Yeah.
You know, we're now beginning, and then at the end, the process of Yoga Nidra is now complete.
Yes.
Nice little container.
A nice little container. So once you get all relaxed and everything, then you go into the steps.
One of my ponderings from last week was letting Reiki specifically let you relax into like a happy bowl of jelly, and that the jelly can really only be jelly with the structure of the bowl. So I've been thinking a lot and reflecting a lot on how we need a certain amount of structure to get to that jelly point.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just melted all over the table. And so yes, having that structure, creating your practice, and knowing that on the other side of it there will be a closing.
Yes.
And then we can become jelly in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the things that's really important with Yoga Nidra is being able to, as a facilitator, keep that space and hold it for everybody.
Yes.
So that they're in a good spot.
Even if trumpets come through the walls.
Even if trumpets come through the walls.
At our last, we had a music practice next door at our last Yoga Nidra, but it worked.
Yes, we just wrapped it right in.
Yeah.
And we let it be on the outside.
And that's the beauty, sort of sidetracking to the benefits of yoga in general. It's not changing the external world. So practicing yoga doesn't make your life easier. It's just a reaction to it.
Yeah. It just helps you manage those expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if that was news to anybody. but it feels easier. It's interesting stuff. So, all right.
So the next one, this one is the one that's somewhat optional. It's the heartfelt resolve. So if you want to set an intention, there is a step where you can set an intention. You don't say it as a wish. You say it as in this moment, I am calm. You don't say, I will be calm, or I hope to be calm, I will be calm, or I am calm.
Well, the future never happens.
Right.
So you will be calm, sure. We're there.
Yeah. But I am. So it's an I am statement. Also, yes, usually sitting it in the body, so actually a somatic kind of practice, so you're bringing yourself into that heart space so that you're feeling it here, and then setting that intention. So yeah, but it can be something big like that. It could be something. This is where using it for different things. That people have used it to, like, say, I don't want a cigarette. So there are very practical uses for this as well. So you can do it along those lines too.
Do you have any insight into why we're holding it in the heart versus the head?
So there's a lot. Again, this is yoga. So in yoga traditions, there are different layers to your body, and one of them is like the body. There's an energy space, there's a heart space, there's a mind space, and so it's really around that. It's probably also there's a body-mind connection and a heart-mind connection. So that's why we're bringing it into that heart emotional space.
Yeah. And making it about me for a second. So when I was picking the name for my business, Heart Mind Healing, there's some really great Eastern teachings that talk about the heart mind, one concept. All the weight that we give to the thinking mind here, but nestled in the heart.
Yeah.
So I love that.
You could go deeper with that. There's also a spiritual connection with the heart, and where the heart expands into with Yoga Nidra, but that's I think that's beyond our scope today. So I think the last time we talked about Yoga Nidra for rest, Yoga Nidra for kind of this releasing, and Yoga Nidra for spiritual. So there's also a real spiritual side to where the heart is and how we're connected to kind of the wider world.
At the end of the day, I mean, they're all words. We were talking a little bit about this earlier. We're creating, the label of the heart and then assigning meaning to it. And with many of these practices, you get to a point where it's all one.
Yeah.
So So next, what's next?
So what's next?
Heartfelt resolve.
Heartfelt resolve, which you may or may not decide to set. And then the other one is energy points. This one is really critical. And it feels like a body scan, but it's not like a body scan. There's a nuance there. So it's the rotation of consciousness. So there's points in your body, and it can relate to things called marma points, or I think they're kind of related to like some of the Eastern, like Chinese traditions of like
meridians and acupressure.
Meridians, and yes. So, and depending on which school of Yoga Nidra is the different points, but they're pretty set. And the idea is you're not scanning the body, you are moving your consciousness from point to point to point to point. So this one is very, if you listen to any Yoga Nidra, you've probably heard this one. Sometimes they call it, you can also see it just by itself sometimes as a 61 point meditation. But it's, yes, so, and the idea is just you're moving energy around, you're moving your consciousness around, and it goes pretty quickly. So an example might be we start at the point between the eyes, and then we move down to the throat center, the heart center, the right shoulder, the right elbow, the right wrist, the right thumb, the right index finger, the right middle finger. So you go around just point by point by point. There's no other words between it, it's just moving fairly quickly.
I know one of my favorite ones, it's been a while since I listened to it, he speaks very quickly through all of that, and at first I was like, oh, that's too fast, and then I realized I'm just focused on following him around the body, and at some point there I even drop out.
Yes, so that's the idea. You're moving the energy, you're moving your consciousness around. And like I said, this one's probably, if you've listened to any Yoga Nidra, this is probably where you've dropped off. and it's pretty typical of the Yoga Nidra.
Okay. So what's after energy points?
So after energy points, you get into the mental phase. So this is really, they call it the mental phase, but in yoga, there's yogic traditions, there's like two phases here. One of them is the mental phase. This is the one we're going to talk about, more like the emotional mental phase, or like the feeling body mental phase, versus the next one that we'll talk about, which is like the thinking mind mental phase. So there's kind of a difference there, and there's a lot of different things that can be done here. So this is one. It's not the same in every Yoga Nidra for this one. It could be moving through hot and cold, heavy and light, or it could be moving, again, doing some more body scan like things where you're breathing in from your heart to your head, and then back down again out through your heart, and then you're moving down through the belly button all the way to your head, and then you're moving back down again, back out through the belly button. So there's different things that can be done here to kind of release that feeling mind.
Very cool. Yeah. Alright, so moving from the feeling mind then into the thinking mind.
Yeah, and then again, this one is the one you may or may not see it. This is the symbology that we talked about. So sometimes it's just a whole bunch of different symbols. A red rose, they'll ask you to imagine a red rose, a red rose, a red rose, a sunset at the beach, a sunset at the beach, a sunset at the beach. So it just goes through these different symbols. They usually mean something, like, and you can have somebody who's consulting with you and working with you to come up with your own set of symbols.
Oh. Like that personalized Yoga Nidra.
That personalized Yoga Nidra. this is the one that sometimes brings up things for people. Some of that deep underlying. Again, one of the things my Yoga Nidra teacher was talking about during this phase is she used a red sports car for one of her Yoga Nidras. And she didn't really think anything of it, and somebody came up to her afterwards and said, when you said that, stuff came up for me, and this memory came up, and all of these feelings came up.
It's in there.
Yeah, it's in there. So this is one where I think that's the reason why not always are we bringing these in. So initially, when you start Yoga Nidra, you might want to start with just the rest and relaxation piece until you want to try some of these moving deeper things.
That's interesting. And interesting that we first sort of get beneath that thinking mind before getting into the thinking portion.
Yeah.
So what's next?
And so then, after you do the symbols, you may or may not bring back in your heartfelt resolve. So now that we've released the thinking mind, we've released all these things, we plant it again because we released all of that stuff. And then we go into the Yoga Nidra. So in this part, we're silent as the facilitator. And we're letting you be there. So we've taken you down deep, we've released all of these things. And I say something like, the speaker will stop. We will come back after 10 minutes or something like that.
And that's the part that always goes so fast.
Yeah, and you may not even, at this point, you may not even be aware that these are going on. Or you may have some awareness. But again, this is the part where your brain's just awake and aware, but your body's totally gone, your thinking mind's gone, and that's Yoga Nidra.
Oh, I love it. You know, for me, my dreams tend to be very active, so Yoga Nidra can usually be more restful to me than sleep. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think there's even some, and I don't know the science behind it or whether the science even like supports it or anything, but a lot of
grain of salt.
yes, that's the. But you know, people have said that it's an hour of Yoga Nidra or one Yoga Nidra practice is equal to 4 hours of sleep.
Yes, I have heard them say that.
Or that there's all these stories about the yogis who didn't need a whole lot of sleep because they were doing Yoga Nidra. So, maybe. I always feel rested after them.
Definitely. And so, is there one more step?
The final one's just completion. So after you do that, you don't just bring people out. You don't just say, okay, let's go, have fun.
Be like the scuba diving, you gotta wait and acclimate.
Right, exactly. So you start to gently bring everybody back into that almost the relaxation phase, and starting to move things, starting to gradually invite people back.
Yes.
Because some people may be deeper than others.
Right. Moving fingers and toes.
Yeah. And just kind of letting everybody come back on their own. And then we finish up with, yes, that Yoga Nidra is now complete. And
to the other side of the container.
Yeah.
I love that. So, Yoga Nidra, not just for sleep.
Not just for sleep.
And you actually have a book here that talks about another potential use for Yoga Nidra.
Right. So there have been a number, the practice has been around for a while. It was actually brought out recently, so it isn't something that everybody was doing. Even the older ones, this one's in 1970, but I think he was one of the first that brought it out of the traditional use and wrote about it in the 70s. but they were yogic traditions. But Richard Miller is one person who learned about the Yoga Nidra, and he took it to, he realized the potential for it, like helping people, and started to use it with veterans who had PTSD. And I think over the years has created this program called iRest, and it's for really specifically for healing people with PTSD symptoms. And like I said, initially it was with veterans, but I think they also realized fairly early on that it also had benefit for people who had complex PTSD from other, experiences in life. So it's, they have very specific programs to be trained to do this. It takes the Yoga Nidra, and I think the one thing that I do like about it, I haven't done a whole lot of research into it, but the book is certainly amazing. It almost brings in a lot more of the self-compassion piece, and
That's key.
I don't know if I would say like the loving kindness aspect, but it is kind of along those lines. So there's a lot about holding space and kindness, and finding kindness in yourself and purpose and meaning and things like that.
Oh, I love that idea, and I'll put a link to the book in the description if that's something that speaks to anyone. I think it's really cool as we're learning more and more about trauma and PTSD, that we're finding these ancient tools that are already there, and just tweaking them a little bit as our medical knowledge advances, to be able to support in gentle and empowering ways.
Yeah.
I think that's really huge. All right. Well, thank you so much. I know before we started recording, Angie and I were talking about all the different things we could go into about Yoga Nidra. So if there's anything in particular that you want to hear us talk about, definitely put it in the comments. So this was the 8 steps of Yoga Nidra, a little bit about Yoga Nidra for PTSD, with resources if you want to go a little deeper on that. Anything else coming to mind to share before we say goodbye? Putting you on the spot again.
I know. I love to, have anybody who's interested, come to one of our
Oh yes, we're having
another
another Yoga Nidra in person at Heart Healing. So if you're local to Gainesville, we've got one for March 29th, if that's the Friday. Again, there'll be a link to that. And if you're listening to this after that date, I'm sure there'll be more. So and something to look forward to. Right now, we've only been having intro to Yoga Nidra classes, but at some point we'll be having more specific Yoga Nidras, and let Angie really spread her wings and shine. So all that information will be in the description. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions. So thank you, Angie.
Oh, thank you too. It's so wonderful to be here, always.
Oh, okay.